It's horrible. I mean, what they did to me is wrong, period, all the way around.
This grandmother sent to prison based on the testimony of a documented liar. The Phoenix police officer's history of dishonesty kept from her attorneys and from the jury. Brady lists are supposed to make sure something like that never happens. They're the lists that are supposed to track officers with past lies and other integrity issues. Tonight, Dave Biscobing continues full disclosure, his year-long investigation exposing Arizona's broken Brady system.
If you're charged with the crime, police and prosecutors are required to give you all of the evidence, even if that evidence hurts their case, like if the officers involved have been caught lying in the past. That's full disclosure. But here's the problem. There's no punishment if they don't do it.
It was devastating. It was worse than a nightmare. I mean,
This is Frances Salazar.
It's hard to put it to words.
Especially when your future rests on the words of a liar.
You have to sit there and just like watch it. You have no choice. Nobody should have to go through that.
Her case began in Phoenix in 2013. Frances and a friend pulled over. She was the passenger, and they had borrowed another friend's car. The temporary license plate was expired. When the officer searched the car, he found a crack pipe that he claimed was wedged down between a seat and the center console. The officer was Phoenix PD's Anthony Armour. In court, he gave damning testimony.
And she admitted it was hers and that she knew that it was crack inside the pipe.
She admitted that the pipe with the crack cocaine in it was hers.
Yes.
That's your testimony?
Yes.
Was the pipe yours?
No,
Did you admit to him that the pipe
I
was
did
yours?
not.
So he lied.
He lied.
But Frances has a history of addiction.
Do you think it's something like, who's going to believe her?
I do. I truly believe that him putting that charge on me had a lot to do with, my past offense. And I'm recovered. People can change, and a lot of people don't fight the system because, let's face it, if you take it to trial, you're facing a lot more time, and it was a very scary thing, 6 to 15 years.
Armour wasn't wearing a body camera, so it was Frances's word versus the officers. The jury believed him.
Do find the defendant as to count 2 guilty.
Frances was convicted, sentenced to 6 years in prison. But what Frances, her attorneys, and the jury didn't know, Officer Anthony Armour is a documented liar with a history of a false arrest.
Unexcusable.
Unjust.
Chris Duran and Ben Rundle are Frances's attorneys.
When an officer does something wrong, the public has to hope that the police department investigates it, that the police department sustains it, that they then turn it over to the county attorney's office, and then that the county attorney's office turns it over to attorneys like you. That seems like a lot of steps that we have to trust them without having anyone else in place to oversee that they actually do it.
That's absolutely right, and that's the problem.
Officer Armour's history of dishonesty never disclosed to them before trial. Instead, 6 months after trial, the attorneys say the prosecution quietly tucked a one-sentence notice in the old case file. Quote, the state has disclosed newly discovered evidence.
So they stuck information about his untruthfulness, his dishonesty, his lying, in a now dead old case file after the trial is over without telling anybody?
Yeah, and not even that. They didn't even put his conduct or his untruthful acts in the court file. It was just a notice of disclosure.
Here's that newly discovered evidence that wasn't new. For an incident a year before Frances's trial, Phoenix police sustained 5 allegations against Armour. He unlawfully entered an apartment, falsely arrested a woman who lived there, lied to his supervisor regarding the circumstances, lied in his incident report, and after a sergeant told him to release the woman from custody, he had her sent to jail anyway. Armour was suspended for 80 hours, but not fired. Phoenix also didn't report the case to AZ Post, the state police board, which could have revoked his license.
That should have been enough right there. And he continued to work. He continued to be a police officer.
About how many drug-related arrests would you say you've completed in your career?
Hundreds.
Who knows what's out there that he has, created havoc in their lives, who these people are, what's been done.
We also discovered Armour had been investigated, but not disciplined, in multiple other internal investigations, including 2 shootings. And in an ongoing lawsuit, he's accused of sexually assaulting a woman by cupping her breast and touching her pubic region. She claimed when she tried to start recording the stop with her phone, Armour grabbed her wrist, handcuffed her, After, she says he took her phone and used it to snap 2 photos. One of her laying on the ground with 2 later arriving officers standing above her. Another of these firefighters.
I mean, do you think if you would have been able to tell the jury, this guy is a liar, he's lied in cases, do you think that would have made a difference?
Absolutely. I absolutely do.
Especially since there was no other evidence.
You never ended up testing that pipe, did you?
Did I?
No.
No.
You never ended up fingerprinting that pipe, did you?
No.
You didn't test Miss Salazar's blood, did you?
No.
Or her urine?
No.
Or perform a drug recognition analysis on her, did you?
No.
So you don't know if she was under the influence of drugs at that time, do you?
No.
Further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
The owner of the car even testified at his own risk.
On the rifle.
And,
With the crack in the pipe.
sir, you know that what you're testifying to is admitting to a crime.
Yes, I understand. Good.
But listen to Prosecutor Elizabeth Lake's closing argument. She told the jury none of that mattered. The officer's word is all they need.
You have a number of witnesses, all of whom have a reason to lie. You have an officer who got on the stand and told you, I went, I confronted her, and she said, I'll take responsibility for it. That's it. End of inquiry. There's no reason to engage in additional investigation.
Because the officer said it, quote, that's it, no reason to investigate further. That's the reality of our justice system. That's the scene that plays out every day in courtrooms everywhere.
This case is about responsibilities.
But those responsible for arresting and prosecuting people for their mistakes are largely shielded from being held responsible for their own.
Police officers enjoy qualified immunity, meaning that as long as what they did was in the course and scope of their employment as a police officer, they're immune from their conduct, even if it was horrible conduct. And for prosecutors, I mean, they have something called absolute immunity. It's the highest immunity under the law. So a prosecutor could withhold evidence and information in a criminal trial that proves or exonerates the criminal defendant, and that doesn't matter under the law.
Here's some background. For the past 20 years, we obtained every Brady list in Arizona and a list of every state police board case. We found of the 1,400 Brady list officers, Phoenix is responsible for roughly 400. There's no record more than 200 of those cases were sent to the state board. 100 Phoenix Brady listers still on the force. We also found at least 60 times police and prosecutors delayed putting Phoenix officers on the list and not putting them on as soon as they knew about credibility issues. The delays usually months and sometimes years. So how many people like Frances and their juries were left in the dark? Frances spent 22 months in prison before a judge ordered her early release.
Oh, I love you guys. Come here.
The joy here masking a layer of pain. She missed the birth of a grandchild and the last years of her own mother's life, who died soon after her release.
Prosecuting people isn't a game. Putting people in prison is not a game. That's why we have the Constitution. That's why we have Brady.
It's why Frances is now suing the police and prosecutors to challenge their immunity.
Because I don't want this to happen to anybody else. I want there to be some kind of change.
I'm investigator Dave Biscobing, ABC 15, Arizona.
The Maricopa County Attorney's Office declined to comment on the Salazar case or answer specific questions, including whether this was ever investigated, if anyone was disciplined, and how many other cases did Officer Armour testify in. Phoenix police also didn't answer questions about why they never reported him to the State Police Board. Full disclosure continues tomorrow at 6:30. We'll take you inside yet another case showing how police can cover up misconduct and keep officers off Brady lists.